I almost ignored that message. I almost rolled over and went back to sleep. If I had, I would have been the second woman to disappear from that cabin. I was standing in the doorway of a bedroom closet at 2:30 in the morning, my phone flashlight trembling in my hand, staring at something that made my entire body go numb. Behind me, through the cabin's thin walls, I could hear police sirens winding up the mountain road, getting closer with every second. But I couldn't move. I couldn't look away, because taped to the wall of a hidden room I was never supposed to find were photographs of women, 6 of them, and in the center of that row, taken through the cabin window just hours earlier, was a photograph of me. Someone had been watching me. Someone had been hiding in this space while I slept peacefully in the next room. And a woman who had stayed in this exact cabin 3 weeks before me had vanished without a trace. The police had no leads, no suspects, no answers, until I opened that closet door. I need to take you back to the beginning so you understand how I ended up in that cabin in the first place. My name is Serena, and at 28 years old, I thought a weekend alone in the mountains was exactly what I needed. I worked as a veterinary technician at an animal hospital in Denver, spending my days caring for sick pets and comforting worried owners. I loved my job, but the past few months had drained me in ways I hadn't expected. My grandmother Yvonne, the woman who had raised me after my parents divorced when I was 9, had passed away in September. She was 74 years old and had been sick for a while, so it wasn't a surprise. But knowing something is coming doesn't make it hurt any less. Grandma Yvonne was the one who taught me how to be brave. She was the one who sat with me during thunderstorms and showed me that the lightning couldn't hurt me if I just counted the seconds between the flash and the rumble. She was the one who encouraged me to move to Denver for my career, even though it meant leaving her behind. After she died, I felt like I was walking through fog, going through the motions of my life without really being present. My best friend Marin had been patient with me through all of it. She brought me soup when I didn't feel like cooking. She listened when I needed to talk and sat quietly when I didn't. About a month after the funeral, she suggested I take a trip somewhere peaceful, somewhere I could disconnect from work and responsibility and just breathe for a few days. "You need to get out of the city," she said over coffee one morning. "Rent a cabin somewhere quiet. No distractions, no obligations. Just you and the mountains." She offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. I needed space to process everything I had been carrying. I needed permission to cry without worrying about making someone else uncomfortable. She understood, even if she didn't love the idea of me going by myself. I found the Airbnb listing a week later, a cozy 1-bedroom A-frame cabin in a small mountain community called Pinebrook, about 2 hours from Denver. The photos showed wood-paneled walls, a stone fireplace, and massive windows overlooking a forest of pine trees. It looked like something from a postcard, the kind of place where you could curl up with a book and forget the rest of the world existed. The host was a woman named Diane Mercer, a retired school teacher who had converted the cabin into a rental after her husband passed away a few years earlier. She had over 200 5-star reviews, all of them praising her responsiveness and the peaceful atmosphere of the property. Everything about it felt safe. I booked the cabin for a Friday through Sunday in late October and started counting down the days. When Friday finally arrived, I packed a small bag, loaded my car, and headed into the mountains. The drive was beautiful, the aspen trees along the road burning gold and orange against the deep green pines. I stopped in the little town at the base of the mountain to pick up groceries, wine, pasta, bread, and coffee for the morning. Then I followed the winding road up to the cabin. It was exactly as the photos promised, quiet and secluded, surrounded by trees, with nothing but the sound of wind and distant birds. I parked in the small gravel driveway and let myself in using the lockbox code Diane had sent. The interior was warm and inviting, smelling faintly of cedar and wood smoke. I unpacked my groceries, hung a few clothes in the bedroom closet, and started a fire in the fireplace. For the first time in months, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to release. That evening, I called Marin to let her know I had arrived safely. She made me promise to text her every morning and night, And I laughed and told her she was being dramatic. "I'm serious," she said. "You're alone in the middle of nowhere. Just humor me." I promised I would. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the fire, and watched the flames dance until my eyes grew heavy. I went to bed early that night, exhausted from the drive and the emotional weight I had been carrying for weeks. The cabin was silent, except for the wind in the trees outside and the occasional creak of the wooden structure settling around me. I fell asleep feeling peaceful. I fell asleep feeling safe. I had no idea what was waiting for me behind the closet wall. Subscribe for more stories and tell me where you're watching from. I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. The room was pitch black, the kind of deep darkness you only get in the mountains, far from city lights and street lamps. I reached for my phone instinctively, squinting against the sudden brightness of the screen. The time read 2:07 a.m. I had been asleep for almost 5 hours. There was a notification from the Airbnb app. A message from Diane, my host. I almost ignored it. What could possibly be urgent enough to message a guest? At 2 in the morning? Probably a glitch in the system, or maybe she had accidentally sent something meant for another guest. But then my phone buzzed again. And again. 3 messages in rapid succession. I unlocked the screen and opened the app, my eyes struggling to adjust to the light. The messages were short, but something about them made my chest tighten before I even finished reading. "Please wake up. This is urgent. You need to leave the cabin right now. I'll refund everything. Just please leave immediately. Something happened to the previous guest. I can't explain over text. Please just go." I read the words 3 times, trying to make sense of them. My first thought was that this had to be some kind of scam. Maybe Diane's account had been hacked and someone was trying to scare me into leaving so they could break in. Or maybe she had confused me with a different guest at a different property. There had to be a logical explanation. I typed back quickly, my fingers clumsy with sleep. "What do you mean? What happened to the previous guest? Is this real?" The response came within seconds, like she had been waiting by her phone. "A woman stayed there 3 weeks ago. She checked in on a Friday and never checked out. Her car was found abandoned 5 miles away. Police have no idea what happened to her. I just found out tonight that someone may have been accessing the property without my knowledge. Please, I'm begging you, get out of there now." My heart began to pound. I sat up in bed and looked around the dark room, suddenly aware of every shadow and every corner I couldn't see. The cabin that had felt so cozy and welcoming hours earlier now felt suffocating. The silence that had seemed peaceful now felt heavy, like it was hiding something. I told myself to stay calm. This could still be a mistake. Diane could be confused, paranoid, or even mentally unwell. Just because she believed something didn't make it true. But there was something in her messages that felt genuine. The urgency, the specific details, the way she kept saying please, like she was terrified on my behalf. I threw off the covers and got out of bed, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. I found the light switch and flipped it, flooding the small bedroom with warm yellow light. Everything looked the same as it had when I went to sleep. My clothes hung in the closet. My phone charger was plugged into the wall. My water glass sat on the nightstand, half empty, but I didn't feel safe anymore. I walked through the cabin, turning on every light I passed. The living room with its stone fireplace and big windows, the small kitchen with its rustic wooden cabinets, the bathroom with its clawfoot tub and vintage mirror. Everything was still and quiet. Nothing looked disturbed or out of place, but the windows that had seemed so beautiful during the day now just showed me darkness. I could see my own reflection staring back at me, pale and wide-eyed, and beyond that, nothing but black. Anyone could be standing out there in the trees, watching me move through the cabin, and I would never know. I checked the front door, locked, the deadbolt secure. I checked the back door that led to the small wooden deck, also locked. All the windows were latched from the inside. If someone had been coming in, they weren't getting in through any obvious entry point. I was about to text Diane back and tell her I was leaving when something caught my eye. The bedroom closet door, the one where I had hung my clothes earlier that evening, was slightly open, just an inch or two, a thin, dark gap between the door and the frame. I was certain I had closed it. I always closed closet doors. It was a habit my grandmother Yvonne had instilled in me when I was a child, convinced that monsters couldn't get you if the closet was properly shut. Even as an adult, I had never broken that habit. But the door was open now, and I had no memory of opening it. I stood in the bedroom doorway, staring at that gap in the closet door, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. Old cabins shifted and settled. Doors swung open on their own sometimes. The floor was probably uneven, or maybe a draft had pushed it. There were a dozen rational explanations, and I ran through all of them in my head while my heart pounded against my ribs. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I thought about Diane's messages, about the woman who had disappeared 3 weeks ago, about someone accessing the property without the owner's knowledge. I thought about how isolated this cabin was, how far I was from the nearest neighbor, how long it would take for anyone to reach me if I screamed. Part of me wanted to just grab my keys and run, get in my car, drive down the mountain, and figure everything else out later. But another part of me needed to understand what I was dealing with. If there was something in this cabin, some sign that someone had been here, I wanted to know before I fled into the darkness. I wasn't going to run blindly into the night without knowing what I was running from. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam was bright and steady, cutting through the shadows as I walked slowly toward the closet. My footsteps sounded too loud on the wooden floor. My breathing sounded too loud in the silence. Everything felt amplified, like the cabin itself was holding its breath. I reached the closet and wrapped my fingers around the edge of the door. The wood was cold against my skin. I pulled it open slowly, letting the light from my phone spill inside. My clothes hung on the rod where I had left them. A spare blanket was folded on the floor beside my empty suitcase. A few wire hangers dangled empty at the far end. Everything looked exactly as it had when I first arrived, but something still felt wrong. I stepped closer and let my flashlight move across the back wall of the closet. That's when I noticed it. A seam in the wood paneling, running vertically from floor to ceiling. It was too straight, too deliberate to be a natural crack. The rest of the walls in the cabin had that rustic, uneven look that comes with age. But this line was perfect, like it had been cut. I reached out and pressed my palm flat against the panel. It felt solid at first, but when I pushed harder, it moved, just slightly, just enough to feel the give beneath my hand. My stomach dropped. I pushed again, putting more weight behind it, and the panel swung inward on hidden hinges. It wasn't a wall. It was a door that had been designed to look like part of the closet, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Behind it was a space I was never supposed to find. The opening was maybe 2 feet wide and pitch black inside. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness and revealed a small hidden room, no bigger than a walk-in closet. The walls were raw wooden studs with no paneling, like this part of the construction had never been finished. The floor was bare plywood, and someone had been living in it. A sleeping bag was unrolled on the floor, bunched up at one end like whoever had been using it had left in a hurry. Beside it sat a worn backpack, unzipped, with clothes spilling out the top. Empty food wrappers were scattered around, granola bar packages, chip bags, water bottles with the caps screwed back on. A flashlight lay on its side near the wall, the same kind you could buy at any hardware store. I swept my light across the space, my hand trembling so badly the beam jumped and shook. That's when I saw the wall to my left. Photographs, printed photographs, taped up in a neat row at eye level. 6 of them, all women, different faces, different ages, different hair colors. Some of the photos had been taken through windows. Others looked like they had been shot inside this very cabin. Candid shots of women cooking in the kitchen, reading by the fire, sleeping in the bed I had just been lying in. And in the center of the row, the most recent addition, was a photo of me. It had been taken through the front window of the cabin. I was standing by the fireplace with a glass of wine in my hand, my face lit by the glow of the flames. I was smiling slightly, relaxed, completely unaware that someone was standing in the darkness outside, watching me through the glass. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at my own face on that wall, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. That photograph had been taken hours ago. I was wearing the same sweater I had on right now. The wine glass in my hand was still sitting on the kitchen counter where I had left it before bed. Whoever took this picture had been standing outside the cabin, watching me through the window, while I sat by the fire feeling safe and peaceful. And then they had come inside. They had been in this hidden room while I slept. My body understood the danger before my brain caught up. A wave of nausea rolled through me and my legs went weak. I stumbled backward out of the closet, nearly tripping over my own feet. The flashlight beam swung wildly across the walls as I fought to stay upright. I had to get out. I had to get out right now. I didn't think about my clothes, my suitcase, or any of the things I had brought with me. I just ran. Through the bedroom, down the short hallway, into the living room where the fireplace had burned down to glowing embers. My car keys were on the kitchen counter where I had left them. I grabbed them with shaking hands, the metal cold and sharp against my palm. The front door seemed impossibly far away. Every step felt like moving through water, slow and heavy and unreal. I kept expecting to hear footsteps behind me, to feel a hand grab my shoulder, to turn around and see someone standing in the shadows. But the cabin stayed silent. Whoever had been hiding in that room wasn't there anymore. Or maybe they were outside, waiting. I reached the front door and fumbled with the deadbolt. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely grip the metal. I turned it the wrong way at first, felt it resist, then corrected, and heard the lock click open. I yanked the door, and cold mountain air rushed in, biting my bare arms and cutting through my thin sleep clothes. The driveway was dark. My car sat alone on the gravel, the only thing between me and the winding road down the mountain. Beyond the small clearing, the pine trees loomed like black walls, their branches swaying slightly in the wind. Anyone could be hiding in those woods. Anyone could be watching me right now, the same way they had watched me through the window. I ran to my car and pulled the door handle. Locked. Of course I had locked it. I pressed the unlock button on my key fob with shaking fingers, heard the chirp of the alarm disengaging, and threw myself into the driver's seat. I slammed the door shut and hit the lock button immediately, sealing myself inside. For a moment, I just sat there, gasping for breath, my whole body shaking. The interior of the car felt like the only safe space left in the world. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to think, tried to make my brain work through the panic. I needed to call 911. I needed to call someone. I pulled out my phone and dialed with trembling fingers. The call connected after 2 rings. 911, what's your emergency? My voice came out broken and breathless. I tried to explain what I had found. The hidden room, the photographs, the woman who had disappeared 3 weeks ago. The words tumbled out in a jumbled rush that probably made no sense. The dispatcher stayed calm, asking me to repeat the address, asking me to confirm I was in a safe location, telling me that officers were being sent to my location. Stay in your vehicle with the doors locked, she said. Don't go back inside. Help is on the way. I hung up and immediately called Maren. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice groggy with sleep. Serena? It's like 2:30 in the morning. What's wrong? I couldn't form words at first. Everything that had happened in the last 20 minutes crashed over me at once, and I started crying, deep, shaking sobs that made it impossible to speak. I heard Maren's voice change from sleepy to alert to panicked in the span of seconds. Serena, talk to me. What happened? Are you okay? I managed to choke out the basics. The message from Diane, the hidden room, the photographs, my own face staring back at me from that wall. Maren was silent for a long moment. Then her voice came through, steady and fierce. The police are coming. You stay in that car and you don't move until they get there. I'm getting dressed right now. I'm coming to you. I stayed in my car with the doors locked, staring at the dark cabin through my windshield, waiting for the sirens. The minutes stretched on forever, but eventually, I saw the red and blue lights flickering through the trees, growing brighter as they wound up the mountain road. Help was coming. I had made it out. The police arrived within 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. 3 patrol cars came up the mountain road, their lights cutting through the darkness and painting the trees in flashes of red and blue. Officers surrounded the cabin with flashlights and weapons drawn. I stayed in my car with the doors locked, just like the dispatcher told me, watching through the windshield as they cleared each room. When they finally came back outside and told me it was safe, I didn't feel relieved. I just felt hollow. They searched the hidden room and found everything I had described: the sleeping bag, the backpack, the food wrappers, the photographs. But they also found something I had missed in my panic: a journal tucked inside the backpack, filled with pages of handwritten notes, detailed observations about the women in the photographs, what time they arrived, what they wore, how they moved through the cabin, what made them vulnerable. The last entry was about me. The woman who had disappeared 3 weeks earlier was named Felicity Grant. She was 31 years old, a nurse from Boulder who had booked the cabin for a solo weekend retreat. Her car was found abandoned on a forest road 5 miles from the property, but no trace of her was ever recovered. The journal mentioned her by name. It described what the writer had planned for her, what he had done when those plans succeeded. The detective wouldn't let me read those pages, and I didn't ask twice. They caught him 2 days later. His name was Orson Vale, a 43-year-old man who lived in a rundown trailer on the outskirts of Pine Brook. He had worked as a handyman in the area for over 15 years and had helped Diane's late husband build the cabin when it was first constructed. He knew about the hidden room because he had built it himself, originally designed as a storm shelter in case of severe weather. After Diane's husband died and she started renting the property to strangers, Orson kept a copy of the key. He had been using that space to watch guests for more than a year. I testified at his trial 4 months later. The courtroom was cold and quiet, filled with people I didn't know, all of them staring at me as I described the night I found those photographs. I looked at Orson Vale sitting at the defense table, his hands folded in front of him, his face blank and unreadable. I thought I would feel anger when I saw him. I thought I would feel rage or hatred or some burning need for revenge. But all I felt was grief. Grief for Felicity Grant, who never got the chance to run. Grief for her family, who would never have answers about her final moments. Grief for the version of myself who had driven up that mountain believing the world was mostly safe. He was convicted of first-degree murder, stalking, and multiple counts of breaking and entering. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Diane reached out to me after the trial. She called me one evening, her voice thick with tears, apologizing over and over for what had happened on her property. She had no idea Orson still had access. She had no idea he had been using the cabin as his hunting ground. She sold the property a month later and donated the proceeds to a victims advocacy organization in Felicity's name. I told her it wasn't her fault. I told her she couldn't have known, but I could hear in her voice that she didn't believe me. Some guilt is too heavy to put down, no matter what anyone says. Maren drove up that night and stayed with me for a week after I got home. She slept on my couch, made me tea I didn't drink, and sat quietly with me when I couldn't find words. She didn't push me to talk about what happened. She just made sure I wasn't alone. I don't travel by myself anymore. It's not that I think every rental property is dangerous or every stranger is a threat, but I understand now how quickly safety can become an illusion. I check closets. I search rooms. I trust my instincts when something feels wrong, even if I can't explain why. Diane's message saved my life that night. A stranger I had never met, reaching out at 2 a.m. because she sensed something wasn't right. She could have waited until morning. She could have told herself it wasn't her problem, but she didn't. A message at 2 a.m. saved my life. I almost ignored it. Now I never ignore the voice that tells me something isn't right. If you want more stories, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from.